People ask me all the time about step toll boats and what does a step toll do. And at Pathfinder, we build 6 different models. We build the 2300 HPS. That HPS stands for high performance step, and that's a single step boat. We build the 2500 hybrid double step, as well as the 26 HPS, 26 TRS, and the 27 open. And what a step toll does, as you can see, this is what's called the step right here. And it's critical that that step be transferred across the entire hull bottom. A lot of times you'll have quasi steps, or people make it look like they have a step in their boat, but they really don't. It's just a notch here. But it's critical that that step go across the whole bottom of the boat. And what I mean by step is basically that this portion of the hull is deeper than this portion of the hull, okay? So what ends up happening is as the boat gets moving and the faster it gets moving, it starts raising out of the water, okay? And once it starts raising out of the water, that water rushing by here, it creates a vacuum right here at the step. And what ends up happening is that air gets sucked into that vacuum, and the air has no place to go but back out the back of the boat. And what that means is that air then takes and it basically creates or reduces the friction between the water and the hull bottom. So it creates a layer of air basically on the back end of the boat, okay? So when it reduces that friction, it frees up that back end of the boat a little bit. It makes the boat faster. It makes it more fuel efficient. That happens when you get to the higher RPM ranges. The reason that it happens there is because at that point the boat has risen out of the water enough to really expose that step and get that air to suck in there. So step toll boats typically are more fuel efficient. They're faster. Sometimes they do have a downside in the step toll. A lot of times a step toll, if it's not correctly designed, the boat will not get on plane until it's at a higher speed. A lot of times people don't like that because they want to be able to go on a slow plane without falling off plane. If, let's say, they're looking on the beach for fish or something like that, they want to be able to cover a lot of ground without falling off plane but not go too fast. Another thing, and especially if it's a poorly designed step toll, is you can get too much aeration on the back end of the boat, and the back end of the boat actually will get too loose. So a lot of people say, well, if step tolls are better, why doesn't everybody design a step toll into every single one of their models? Because it takes a lot of design sophistication, really is the answer to that. And like I said, you don't get that really extra added benefits until you get higher up in the speeds. Now another thing about them that's really nice too is that the boats tend to run flatter than a standard V-hull. So what I mean by flatter is more flat to the water like that, where a standard V-hull rides like this, okay? So on that standard V-hull, a lot of times that water is going to be hitting back here, okay? Like at the console or maybe where you are at the helm, you are feeling that water. Now, if a step toll boat tends to ride flatter, so that water's hitting the bow more, it's hitting that nice knife point edge of the bow, so it really takes and separates that water, dampens it down, softens it a whole bunch. So for instance, you know, when you're running into a sea, the common thing to do is drop the trim tabs. That's because you make your boat run flatter and you want to use the forward section of your boat, right? Well, in a step toll boat, the boat is automatically already doing that because it runs flatter, so you don't have to use the trim tabs as much. So when you use the trim tabs, you have a lot of drag. That makes that boat go slower. Standard V-hull, you're running in, you drop the tabs, you have a lot of drag there, even though it drops that nose. On a step boat, you don't have to drop those tabs to get that nice ride, especially running into a head sea.